Alright guys, it's time to open up those boxes that Lee Brake sent over for the 64 FAIRLANE. Let's open them up, check out what we got. So rather than waiting on all the suspension parts and us reassembling the whole front suspension before installing the brakes, what we're going to do is we're actually going to take the spindles, as you see here, which were just freshly painted, and we're going to start actually assembling the brakes on those units. So we can put this whole assembly together off of the car, and then when the suspension and all the other components come in, then we can go ahead and just install these disc brake assemblies onto the car. Kind of like, you know, like the Le Mans, when they did it back in Le Mans. It's kind of different, but in the same sense. Alright, so now that everything is showing up on one singular day, we're slowly but surely getting the whole front suspension all figured out. So, brand new energy bushings, which are for the lower control arm. So we're going to be cutting off the excess material that you see here with just a razor blade. That'll reveal the inner shaft, and then we're going to be flipping it over, and on the hydraulic press we'll be heating this up while pressing out the center shaft, and that'll also be removing the remaining rubber bushing that sits inside the sleeve. So that's nice and easy. These actually go on super easy. I already got the other side done. Shocked at how easy those go together, so that's awesome. Alright, so we got the new Moog strut rod bushings with the new grade 8 hardware. Same thing at the control arm side, lower control arm. We got the upper control arm in place. The brakes are waiting to go on. Fresh grade 8 hardware, thanks to Dad. It's the first fit up of suspension after the strut rod brace got fixed. Look at that. Once things are tightened down, right into place. All right. Alright, so just picked up the Schedule 40 3.5 inch pipe, and this is what it's going to look like once it's welded onto the plate I'm about to cut out. And what these are going to be are spring isolators. So as you can see there, it's just small enough to fit in the center of the spring. So because the shock tower pocket is a lot larger than the spring, I can't just install the spring by itself. So I'm going to cut this out of steel very shortly. This is going to get welded to it, and then that will keep the spring centered in the shock tower. So let's go cut some steel. Got my Princess Auto Harbor Freight plasma cutter. We're going to see if it's going to cut through this. Not bad, but not great. Not bad for the little guy. I would have thought it would have overheated, but surprisingly not. Did good. I'll let it cool off. You did good, little buddy, you did good. Alright, the nice thing about plasma cutting is the steel isn't super hot as if it was cut with an oxyacetylene torch. It kind of reduces the warpage of the steel as well. So I mean, pick it up by hand. This one was the last one cut, still can pick it up by hand. Obviously got some cleaning up to do on the grinder. If you're wondering about these flat spots, the plate was 6 inches, the pocket is 6 1/8, but I think I'm gonna give myself a little bit of wiggle room, so I'm gonna probably just go to the 6 and make my life a little easier in terms of fitting things up, because I always try to do super tight tolerances and then I have to end up cleaning them up regardless, so 6 inches is gonna be fine. Alright, I believe this package is QA1. Yep, correcto mungo. Now, not everything in this package... Ooh, 2 banners. Not everything in this package is for the 64 FAIRLANE. We got a little secret project going on that you guys have no idea about, which I'll share with you when it's ready. But, for the FAIRLANE, we got some QA1 goodies that we basically pieced together. So it's not a kit that QA1 offers. However, QA1 does have so many parts that we can interchange between every unit. So like shock, the lower shock mounts, the upper shock mounts, the shock lengths, the springs, the spring sizes, spring rates, all of that we can customize and make it work for said project. So if they don't offer a kit for your car, there is a high possibility that they have parts that could work for your car if you send the measurements and other specifications. Obviously going a more customized route. Okay, aside from my OCD organization here, we got a few things going on the workbench here. We obviously have the QA1 double adjustable shocks for the rear of the car. Again, these are not 64 FAIRLANE specific shocks. However, I sent them the length of the shock I need at the ride height desired, and this is the shock that they came up with. These are the front Pro Coil coilover double adjustable with the threaded portion for the adjustment of the 350 weight springs. And then over here we have the factory upper shock mount. This hat here is what sits in the inside of the shock tower. And then this is what I've designed to basically sit inside that hat to locate the coil spring that you see here. Now the reason we had to do this, as you can see, is because the factory coil spring is a lot larger compared to the QA1 coilover spring itself. So the factory is 6 inches and the QA1 I believe is 5 inches. So again, you have half an inch on both sides of play, and you obviously don't want that spring to be bouncing around as you're driving. So went with a schedule 40 4-inch pipe, and that locates the coil spring perfectly. And then we started prototyping some designs. So this was the first design, and as you can see, the little hat is perfectly centered with the top plate. Now I mounted that up inside the car, and at ride height with the shock traveling at a slight angle, what was happening was the shock body was getting super close to one side of this plate here. So what I did on the prototype number 2 is I offset the hat so that the coil spring is now residing more on the outside of the vehicle. And then with the shock travel, as you can see here, through that center point and the angle of the suspension travel, everything worked out perfectly. So I had that mounted up already. So we're going to duplicate this design and make another one. I also shortened the hat. This is 1 inch, whereas this one was half an inch. So half inch is all you need in order to locate the coil spring. The 1 inch started to contact the secondary coil here, which obviously would cause friction and binding. So got rid of that design and went with this design. So we basically just screwed it up in place with some self-tappers, which work perfectly because as you can see, when that's sitting up in the car like so, those don't hit the upper shock tower. So sandblasted it, cleaned it all up. So we're gonna do the same to this one, remake this guy here for this side, and get these bad boys all mounted up on the car so we can lower her down and check out the new ride height. 400 millisecond shot. Alright, so continuing with the suspension, we got some products from QA1. If you didn't know this, QA1 also sells heim joints, rod ends, whatever you want to call them, spherical bearings, ball joints, and a lot of other components for suspension. They just don't sell coilovers and control arms and all that other suspension. So if you're looking for those types of components, make sure to check them out because they have them and they are top notch. But nonetheless, we are creating our own strut rod braces. So as you can see here, this is the factory strut rod brace, and it's got some heavy pitting here, which is why I was kind of skeptical on using it. Also, I don't like the factory rubber bushings and how much they cause the suspension to bind. So with this rod end system, it'll allow smoother articulation of the front suspension, and it will also make things solid. So if you've ever seen a video of strut rod braces, when you hit the brakes hard and you see the car kind of shuttle to one side or the other, that's because those rubber bushings are compressing and changing the geometry of the suspension. So with this will make things super solid and then also provide smoother articulation of the suspension. Alright, so here you can see a better look. Again, this is where the bolt is going to go inside the plate, and we got our first mock-up of the mount that's going to attach to the bracket, and then these two plates are going to sandwich the rod end, which is going to get welded to this plate, as you can see there, those lines there. So I measured different thicknesses. This is 3/8 plates to match the same as this. If I were to do 1/4 inch, I could get a little bit longer of a piece, but nonetheless, it's going to sandwich the bolt in there as well and make everything nice and nice. So just trying to figure out the whole length of the rod itself, the DOM tubing, how much I'm going to need. So obviously we're going to figure out this point to this point, and that should give us where we're at. Should have a mock-up here very shortly. Alright, so we got the passenger side, the right side all tacked up. Got the control arm portion all welded. Still got a center, it's all center punch, got to drill it out. As you can see, we got regular thread and we got reverse thread here so that you can turn the tube, right, and adjust it either longer or shorter to change your caster. So 5/8 bolt, 5/8 rod end, 5/8 through bolt, and 5/8 to the bracket mount. So it should be super solid. All DOM tubing, which I cleaned up nice. For the welds. So we just tack welded it for now. We're gonna get it fit up, and hopefully everything fits properly, and we don't need to cut the tacks and redo it or shorten the tube. But I think we got it right on the money first shot. So just in case you're curious as to why there's that step there, that's what sits inside there. And I made it just shy of that because when I put the thicker steel washer on, I want it to not be super flush because I want it to have some form of pull on that piece. All right, back to work on the FAIRLANE, and we got the washer all set up. We got, obviously we're gonna need a longer through bolt, but everything's looking nice and solid. As you can see, that's all mounted up in place. We're gonna need a shorter 5/8 through bolt for the rod end. And then you can see with the lower control arm, generally at ride height, everything lines up nice. And again, with this, the whole reason we're doing this is for smoother movement. Basically, there's no binding. And if you're wondering, there's lots of side-to-side movement before it's going to hit these tabs. And the lower control arm is not going to move in that manner to cause that rod end to want to make contact. So everything is looking nice and solid. All right, so we're on the passenger side now, and this is basically what I was going to run before I decided to do the rod end strut rod bushings, solid strut rod bushings. And as you can see, it's got the factory strut rod with the rubber bushings. Those are brand new, Moog, and yes, that's how the wash is supposed to go. But let's just show you for comparison's sake. It takes a lot of effort, and there's a lot of binding, as you can see, all because of that rubber bushing right there. So now if we go back on the other side, I just put the DOM tubing just as it's sitting there, and as you can see, this is how it's going to move. Look, one finger, everything articulates nice and smooth.